If you've just logged in now, we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Onyeiwu from our own special economics department, who is coming to talk to us about his research in data. Now, one thing that I've been saying to the class all the semester, Doctor, is that we are a class of very individual people. We are all very separate. We have very specific interests in our areas, our sciences, maybe even our humanities, but we're all very interested in these things. But one thing that really unites us, and unites us very, very well, is that we're all passionate, absolutely passionate about looking into data. Now, the thing is, though, that working with data is really one of those things that you do in, I would argue, in any discipline, simply because any discipline where you're working, eventually decisions have to be made, and you have to decide whether or not you should do one thing or do something else. Yeah. And in order to make those decisions, you have to analyze some form of data. And so whether that data comes to you in the form of, say, economics data or financial data, or whether it comes to you in the form of maybe protein data and biology, or whether that data comes to you in the form of surveys, or maybe just doing crowdsourcing where you're asking many different people about their opinions on things. Eventually all that information has to be digested in some way so that you can actually make some decision. And so I think that that's actually where this class is very, very strong, in that we are coming together in the ability that we have here in generating skills to actually go through and make decisions from our data that we have here. So we're actually analyzing better ways of making data. Anyway, I think I've said enough there, but for the class here who just joined, we have Dr. Onyeiwu from economics, and Dr. Onyeiwu, I will give you the microphone, the floor, and take it away. It's great to have you. Thank you.
Okay, it's a pleasure to be with you guys. Thanks, Oliver. I'm looking at the screen here. I think I recognize some of the students in your class. They've been in my class as well. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm in the econ department. I've been at Allegheny since 2001. And as you guys know, our role as professors is not only to teach, but also to do research. So I'm here today to share one piece of my research with you guys. Generally, I work on things about developing countries. I work on economic development, specifically on foreign direct investment, on globalization, on technological issues, but they all focus on how can we make the economies of developing countries better. And making those economies better means having good policies. You know, if you don't have good economic policies, you're not going to be able to achieve economic progress. You're not going to be able to improve living standards. You're not going to be able to eliminate poverty in developing countries. So economists don't just, I mean, some of you, when you hear economics, you think, oh, it's quantitative analysis, we do economic modeling, we do statistics and all that. But a big chunk of what economists do is policy. They come up with ideas about how to get things better. So that's why we have economists working in healthcare, we have economists working in housing, we have economists working in the labor sector, in trade, coming up with policies about how to make things better. And that's what I do. I try to come up with policies that will make developing countries better. And in making those policies, they have to be driven by data. That's the fun of doing economics. See, there are some people who do policy on the basis of ideology, you know, what they believe in. Whether it's true or not, they don't care. It's just what they believe in, they want to do it. But that's not what economists do. We make policies on the basis of evidence. So there's evidence-based research, evidence-based policy. And so the research I want to share with you is about foreign direct investment in the Middle East and North Africa. We use a shorthand for that, MENA, M-E-N-A. foreign direct investment. Let me tell you what the problem is before we talk about the policies we need to solve that problem. Middle East and North African countries are made up of North Africa countries like Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, Libya, and then Middle East countries, you have the Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and then you go into the other side, West Asian countries who are in the Middle East like Jordan, Israel, Palestine, and then you have Iran. Here is what their problem is. They are rich in resources, this region, rich, very rich. But guess what? They're having difficulties attracting foreign direct investment. So what do I mean by foreign direct investment? By foreign direct investment, economists mean when businesses go to another country to set up enterprises. So when Apple goes to Egypt to establish a factory to produce iPhones, that's foreign direct investment. When General Motors goes to United Arab Emirates, UAE, to establish a plant to produce cars there, that's foreign direct investment. So this region does not have enough foreign direct investment. Paradoxically, poor regions, regions that are not endowed with resources, attract more foreign investment than the MENA region. And the MENA region, they are now saying, oh, no, we need foreign investment because we're going to run out of oil very, very soon. You know, oil, they depend on oil. And oil is a depletable resource, non-renewable resource. And therefore, when they run out of oil, they're going to be in trouble. So that's why they are trying to attract more businesses to the region. But they have tried and tried and tried and tried. They are not having success. So what countries typically do when they run into that problem is they go to consultants. Say, those of you who are econ majors or business majors, many of you will end up working for consulting firms. So they will usually go to consulting firms and say, hey, we need help. What can we do to attract more foreign investment? And the consulting company will charge big bucks. We're talking of millions of dollars that they're going to charge to come up with this advice. So it's a very lucrative area of business and economics. Okay, so let me ask you guys a question. Why is foreign direct investment important? What are some of the advantages of having foreign direct investment? Am I able to hear from them, Oliver?
Yes, you are. You can. They can unmute and they can ask you questions.
All right. Can somebody tell us why are they crazy, the Middle East and North African countries, looking for foreign investment?
It can increase the amount of employment within the region. It can increase, increase the number of jobs.
Yes, that's number one. Employment, job creation, and high-paying jobs too. Okay, so that's good. Any other reason? Any other reason why they desperately need foreign investment? Apart from jobs?
They can have a resource that they, might want to like use themselves. So becoming allies, you can trade that resource.
Yeah, resource. Yes, there is the resource transfer effect. That is when foreign investors come in, foreign direct investors come into this region, they bring technology with them. They train the people, so the people gain skills. So that's good. So anyway, yes, that is what I'm trying to help them to do, to find out what is going on. Why is it that they are not getting foreign investments? So I'm going to take you guys to my PowerPoint. Did they share?
Yes, I can see that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so let me go up the way up here. See. All right, so here are my research questions. Here are my research questions here. Why are foreign direct investment, that's what we call FDI, flows to many countries below expectations? And so let me, macroeconomic, fiscal, and institutional indicators helpful in explaining differences in the flows of foreign direct investment. Does investment in science and technology explain disparities in foreign direct investment flows to developing countries? What are the policy implications for developing countries? So let me just take you from here. I'm going to skip a number of slides here. What this slide is telling you is that Middle East and North African countries are not attracting levels of foreign investment that reflect their capabilities, that they are capable of attracting investment, but they are not currently doing so at satisfactory levels. So I'm just going to show you one graph to that. Look at this. So I have different regions of developing countries here. They are color-coded. So this shows you the volume of foreign investment they are attracting. This is expressed in dollars here. So like this one is like $50 billion, $100 billion. So here is the thing here. This one here is MENA countries. This is North Africa. This is West Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. I want you to focus on just 2 or 3 of them. Look at the red bar. This is Middle East and North Africa. Look at the trend. Foreign direct investment has been going down over time, decreasing. Now look at East Asia. East Asia includes China, South Korea, Indonesia, South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong. Look at high and increasing. Look at the green one, Southeast Asia, increasing. So of all the regions of the developing countries, the MENA countries that are witnessing falling stock of falling flows of foreign direct investment. Well, so one of the things I looked at for is this. When you see businesses avoiding a particular region, what comes to your mind is that, oh, it's not lucrative to invest in that region. So foreign businesses, foreign investors are not making money by investing there. So this equation here enables me to see what the rate of return, we call this rate of return of FDI in MENA countries. So I use this formula to find out what the rate of return is. I found that the rate of return on investment in MENA countries is very high. It's higher than many regions that are getting foreign investment. So the problem is not that the region is not lucrative, it's lucrative. So here is the Middle East here. Look at the return here. You see 1.69 rate of return compared to the other regions. Some of them has even negative returns. People are not making money there. So why? Why are they not getting foreign investment? Okay, so I paused. I said, wait a minute. Let me look at some of the countries and see what is going on. I actually found that some of the countries are doing better than others. So I looked at this 17 countries here in the Middle East and North Africa. I find that Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel, they were doing relatively well, followed by UAE, Egypt. Then the ones that are really not doing well are Yemen, Oman, Kuwait. How do I know that? If you look at the absolute numbers, and then you look at the percentage of the GDP. Let me just tell you guys that in economics, when we use data, we don't like using absolute data, absolute numbers, because absolute numbers don't reflect the size, differences in the size of the economies. So that's why we express data as a percentage of the GDP. So when you look at how much income a big country like Nigeria is generating every year, and you look at the one that a small country like Togo in West Africa is generating, that's not a good comparison when you use data that way. So to give you a good sense of the message from the data, you have to compare it with relative size of the economy. So that's why here I looked at foreign direct investment as a percentage of the GDP. Here is just the absolute number. So I don't want to look at this because this is deceptive. So you look at as a percentage of GDP. Now, to answer the question about why Middle East and North African countries are not receiving impressive levels of foreign investment, guess what I do, my strategy? I want to look at why some of them are getting more than the others, because that can help me answer the question. That maybe there are some variables that explain why Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and to some extent UAE are getting more foreign investment than, say, Yemen, Oman, and Kuwait. So once I know why they are receiving different levels, I can then say, hey, the ones that are not doing well, here's what you need to do in order to attract more foreign direct investment. And that answer is data-driven. I can't just sit down and say, hey, here's why. Okay, so now, here in economics, before you use data, theory will tell you what to look for, what kind of data to look for. We don't cherry pick data. The worst thing a researcher, an analyst can do is to cherry pick data. It's going to give you what? Garbage in, garbage out. So in economics, we have a way, a mechanism for deciding what data to use. We don't choose data arbitrarily. We go to our theory, our economic theory. So economic theory will tell you for a given problem, here are the data you need to explore that problem. So I went to the literature, I looked at our models and everything, and I found that, oh, here are some of the things that may explain why countries receive different levels of foreign investment. I don't want to take you through the literature and the way I came up with this, but this is what the models and the theory, this is what they asked me to look for. Okay, so in economic analysis, when we use data, we divide that data into two categories: dependent variable and explanatory variables. So the dependent variable is the problem you are trying to solve. It's the one that is giving you sleepless nights, headache. And in my own case, it's foreign direct investment. And I measure it as a percentage of GDP. Remember, I cannot just use the total number because it's not going to control for differences in the sizes of countries. Big countries naturally will get more FDI, small countries will get small FDI. So we have to account for their sizes. So my dependent variable would then be net foreign direct investment flows as a percentage of the gross domestic product. For those of you who haven't taken economics, I'm sorry, I'm just going to be using some concepts maybe that you're not familiar with. The GDP is the gross domestic product. It's simply the monetary value of how much goods and services a country is producing in a given year. So we put money value to the computers, the cars, the bicycles, the hamburgers, and everything a country produces in a given year, the GDP measures that. And my foreign direct investment is measured as a percentage of that. Now, here are some of the things that may explain why countries get different levels of FDI. One is the GDP growth rate, how fast their annual production is increasing from year to year. Trade, do they trade a lot? Countries that trade a lot with other countries, they tend to attract more foreign direct investment. Let me go back to the first one, GDP growth rates. The faster a country is growing, that means that it's lucrative to do business in that country. So you see businesses coming in. Resources, resource endowment, there is a big question mark on that. It could attract or it could not attract foreign direct investors. So it depends. So I put a question mark there. So some people think that because many countries, Middle East and North African countries are rich in resources, that will help them attract foreign investment. We have also seen previous studies that found the opposite, that the richer you are in resources, the less foreign direct investment you get. Now, I'm going to quickly run over down the list here. Infrastructure. If you have good infrastructure, you attract foreign investors. If you are technologically advanced, investors will like that, they will come. Investors don't like corruption. If a country is too corrupt, they stay away. Tax rates, just like any other country, you know, businesses like countries with low tax rates so they don't lose their profits. The currency exchange rates is also a factor. Inflation, you know, they don't like an economy with inflation or economy with high interest rates. They want political stability. You don't want to go to a country where they are always fighting or there is riots and then you lose your investment. They don't want that. Regime type. Foreign investors like countries that are democratic. They don't like autocratic regimes because in autocratic regimes, their businesses can be confiscated, can be seized. And finally, investments. You know, they want to invest. Foreign businesses want to go to countries where the government invests in the economy, in infrastructure, and so on, where you have airports and you have goods, seaports, good schools. So that's important for foreign investment. Now, before I show you my data set, because that's where I'm going to show you how I use data to then make policies, come up with policies that may help these countries to attract more businesses. I want to show you one more thing about what economists do. So, in order to analyze data, we have what we call empirical model. That is, that empirical model will show you the relationship between your dependent variable and your explanatory variables. Like this Y sub IT shows foreign direct investment in country I in time T. And on the right-hand side, the X is a vector of all the explanatory variables. So all the explanatory variables I showed you earlier on, that's what the XITK represents. Then beta K, very important. That's my policy tool. And I'm going to show you when I do the data. So beta is the slope of my regression equation. So that beta tells me by how much my foreign direct investment is going to change if economic growth, if GDP growth rate changes by 1%. So if you increase economic growth by 1% in one country, beta, that B, shows me how much foreign direct investment will increase or decrease. for each of the variables. So it's a very important thing in that equation. Then epsilon is what we call error term. When you're analyzing data, there may be some data you would omit for different reasons. Either because that data is not available, or maybe you inadvertently did not include that data in your data set. That is going to capture the error term for you. So it's a way of saying, hey, you are missing some data in your data set. And therefore, when you do your statistical analysis, you're going to see how big that error is. You want that error to be as small as possible in order to give you good results. Now, these other equations, I don't want to go through them. You don't need those. Any questions so far? Any questions? Okay. So if there are no questions, I'm going to show you. So what I then did, I said, okay, my economic theory tells me here are the data I should look for. So the question is, how am I going to get this data? So luckily, we have databases. So economists use databases. I don't have to go out and start looking for this by myself. So I just go to websites. So there are two main databases that I got this data set from the World Bank and from the International Monetary Fund. So these are data that people have collected, put them in a database. Library subscribes to the one from the World Bank. It's very expensive database. And the IMF, International Monetary Fund database is free, supplied free of charge. So one good thing about doing research in economics is that we have access to many databases, most of which are free. So you just go, you download. Some of them are user-friendly, some of them are not. And sometimes too, you have to be creative in collecting data. The data may not be available in the form that you really need it. So you have to make some adjustments. You have to cut and paste from different sources. All right, sometimes you might have missing data, as I'm gonna show you in some of my data sets. So I looked for data from these sources. I'm going to move over here and hopefully, let me see if I can find my sharing. So let's go in here. No. Oops, no. I don't want to exceed. All right. So, okay.
Can I just ask a simple question there, Doctor?
Yeah.
That is that when you are looking at all these variables to begin your research,
yeah.
How do you know where to begin your research? Like, how do you know if you didn't recognize these variables, how would you know which ones to begin with when you are building your model?
I go into the literature. I look at what people have used in the past. I can look at a study that has been conducted in, say, Latin America. You know, my study is on Middle East and North Africa. So I may look at previous studies on Latin America, and I look at different studies. Look at the variables they use. So in economics, we're allowed to say, oh, especially if the studies are published in good journals, recognized journals, I can say, oh, author A or author B use GDP per capita, use openness, then I can reference them and then use the same variables.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So let me share. Am I able to share my data sets?
You'll have to go to a different, you have to share a different screen.
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm trying to see how I can do that.
I think you have to unshare this screen and then move to the other screen.
Okay, stop share. Okay, I got it. Then I go in here and yes. You see that?
Yes, it's just come up.
Okay, so here is the data set that I got from the World Bank and the IMF. Now look at this. I have 16 countries. that I'm using for this. You see those are the variables I told you. They are I put them in rows here: FDI, growth, openness, resource, everything. And here are the countries. This is Algeria. So I looked at these countries from 2000 to 2015 for each of them. Now see how I'm stacking the data. I'm stacking them on top of each other. So this is Bahrain. And this is Egypt. See how I'm stacking them from 2000 to 2015. So this is what economists call panel data, P-A-N-E-L. I could have used the time series. If I use time series, I'm just going to look at one country for maybe 50 years. Maybe I take only Israel and look at Israel for 50 or 100 years. That would be time series. But when I have different countries for different years and put them together, that's a panel. All right? And sometimes an economist will use a cross-sectional. That is, I look at only 1 year, like 2000, for different countries. But there is a consensus that panel regressions are better because you're looking at different countries over a period of time. So that is my data set. Now look at this. You see that I'm missing some data like tax rate. I'm missing some data for Bahrain. I'm missing some data of points here. The good thing about the software we use for regression analysis is it can still run the regression with missing data. So that is the good thing, that there has been advances in data analytics over time. If I did this like maybe 30, 40 years ago, I couldn't run this regression because it's going to give me error messages that I'm missing data. But now it's become, data analytics have become very sophisticated. We have software that can give you results even with missing data. So the next thing I would do is that I will use the software here. So let me copy these data sets. So I copy it. I copy all this, see, all this way. Copy. And then I'll stop sharing this one. And then I want to go back here, share Stata. See, yeah, right here. Do you see Stata? We use, one of the software we use is called Stata. Do you guys see that?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, so I go into Stata. I'm sure the economic students here will recognize this. I go into here, I go into data editor. Then I paste my data sets. I say, I want my variables to be in the first row, see? So I copied it from the Excel to this. Then I close it up. Oops, I hope, yeah, so let me exit from here. I want to, hide, okay, oops. I don't see my data set now. Okay, let me go back here. Data editor. Okay. So data editor, I put it here and I close it down. Whoops. Okay. So I'm trying to, I can't find my stuff here. I'm supposed to, let's see. All right, so when I put it here, let's see here, regress. All right. So here is what I'm gonna do. So I go in here, I say regress, and then I put all the other variables. I think because, let me go up here. I'm not seeing those variables again to.
Well, otherwise, do you have a maybe a printout or a PDF or some?
Yeah, I have the results. I just wanted to show you guys how I run it. I think because I'm doing it on Zoom, it's not showing me the variables to pick up. Let me do one more time and then I can do something else. There is a command here. So it's supposed to be this. And then it's supposed to ask me a question whether I want to. Okay, so variables. There are no items to show. So anyway, let me go ahead and show you the printout, okay? So I run the regression using this interface. You can also do it on Excel. I run regression on Excel. I'm sure in computer science, you have your software for running regressions. So after running the regressions, so here is what I then got. So I'm gonna go back here. Are you seeing my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, good. So after running the regression, here is the results I got. Remember that beta I was telling you guys? Okay, so let's focus on the pooled. Anywhere you see pooled, forget about these other two columns. So that beta I was telling you, here is the beta. And so the variables with asterisks are the significant variables. What that is telling me is that my regression results showed me that, yes, these variables actually affect foreign direct investment. Let me give you one interpretation, like this one. It says that a 1% increase in economic growth rate. So if the yearly output that a country produces increases by 1%, that country is going to attract the foreign direct investment that comes into that country is going to increase by 0.8%. If a country increases openness, which is measured by trade, so a 1% increase in the volume of trade will cause foreign direct investment into that country to increase by 0.07%. Now look at the sign. This is positive. So that means that they increase foreign direct investment. Look at resources. It has a negative sign. It means that the more resources, natural resources a country has, the less foreign direct investment it gets. Infrastructure is not significant. Foreign investors don't care whether you have good infrastructure or not. That's why I don't have an asterisk. The same thing with technology. They care about corruption. The more corrupt a country is, the less foreign direct investment it gets. This one, tax rate, is the one that's really perplexing that I couldn't explain. This means that if you increase your tax rate, that you attract investors, that doesn't make sense. It's inconsistent with what we expect in the literature, in economics. So, and I said that in the paper that I don't know was, maybe I didn't use the right data to measure this. So that's why I'm supposed to get a negative sign here. Exchange rate is complicated for non-economists, so I'm going to leave that out. The one that you can easily understand is inflation. An increase in inflation, well, inflation is not significant. So in fact, exchange rate and inflation, they are not significant. So I don't want to talk about them. Foreign investors don't worry about them. Interest rate, if you increase interest rates in a country, then that country would attract less foreign direct investment. Here, political stability is important. The more stable you are, the more foreign investment you get. The more democratic you are, this is regime type, the more foreign investment you get. This is not significant. This is not significant, so forget about it. Now, that comes my policy. So I now have to use these results to propose policy. That's the good thing about data analytics. I analyze my data sets, got results, and now here's what I want to suggest to these countries. I'm just going to skip a bunch of. So I'm going to tell them that variables such as economic growth, inflation, interest rates, corporate tax and trade, they are the things killing you. You've got to fix them. So find ways of increasing your economic growth. Reduce your inflation rate if you want to attract more foreign direct investment. Reduce your interest rates. Maintain political stability in your country. Don't worry about science and technology. Foreign investors are not interested in that. Liberalize trade. Promote political rights and civil liberties. Those are the things that you need to do to attract foreign investment. See, these are policy variables. These are things that these countries can implement in order to attract foreign investment. So let me just stop here, and maybe students will have questions. And let me stop. Okay, any questions?
So what's the, like what you would say the difference would be between like the fixed, like the pooled, fixed, and random?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Your mic is a little bit unclear. So can you repeat?
What is the difference between pooled, fixed, and random?
Oh, okay. Fixed effects and random effects?
Yeah.
Oh, fixed effects and random effects model. So this is important when you are using Stata. See, when I was using the software, you know, fortunately, it didn't show me the column where I have to click things. I haven't done this before on Zoom. So it would ask me what model do I want to use, whether I want to use fixed effects to run the data or the random effects. The fixed effects, the difference between them is the assumption you are making. So when we say fixed effects, it means that there are country-specific factors. There are country-specific factors that explain why Jordan and Israel are getting more foreign direct investments than other countries. Let me give you an example. Somebody might say, oh, you know what? Israel is very close to the US. So, I mean, it has good relations with the US. So US gets a lot of aid from Israel. And that's why Israel is doing better than, let's say, Yemen. So that's a fixed effect. That's a fixed effect that my regression software will recognize and say, oh, Israel is different. There's something about Israel. Another fixed effect is Jordan is a landlocked country. It's landlocked. It has no sea outlets. So the fixed effects model will capture the fact that Jordan is landlocked. So could that be affecting Jordan's ability to attract foreign investment? That's another thing that the fixed effect model does. I might have not included resources in my model, but the fixed effects will pick it up. The fixed effects model will recognize the fact that there are some countries that are resource endowed, and that may affect the ability to attract investment, so it will capture that. Now, random effects model. There is war in Yemen. There has been war going on in Yemen. So that's random. You couldn't predict that war. So that war may have affected Yemen's ability to attract foreign investment. So it's a random effect. So that model captures events that were unpredicted, like COVID now. You know, so if you run a regression, maybe in the next 10 years, and then you see data covering COVID era, you see that that data set is going to look different during the year we had COVID, the GDP is going to be smaller, incomes are going to be smaller, unemployment is going to be too high. So the random effect model would pick that up, that there's something that was unexpected that happened in that year or 2 years, and then correct it. So that it doesn't, so the reason why we do that is so that it doesn't skew your results. All right. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers it.
Okay. Any other question?
I have a question about the intercept
Yes.
that you got from your regression model,
Yes.
because I saw that it was a negative number, and so I didn't know if that could be interpreted as like the foreign direct investment decreasing if you control for all of the other explanatory variables.
That's an excellent question, Alex. You know, so the intercept term is the constant term. So if you look at the regression results, so you have two terms there, the constant term or the intercept term and the slope term, which is the beta. So what the intercept term measures is that if you set all of the explanatory variables to 0, suppose they were 0, how much foreign direct investment would a country get? And Alex said, oh, you know, it turned out to be negative. So you know what? In empirical analysis in economics, there are some problems where the intercept really has no intuitive value. Has no intuitive value. That is, you cannot explain it in terms of economics. So there is nothing like, you know, having negative foreign direct investment if you set all factors to 0. So we just ignore the intercept term. So in some economic problems, the intercept has intuitive value, but in my own case, it does not have any policy usefulness. So I'm not worried about it, all right? But from a technical point of view, from a theoretical point of view, you will say that if you set the values of all the explanatory variables to 0, then FDI would be negative. That's all you can say. So it has no policy purposes because my work is a policy-oriented work, so I don't even look at it. I don't talk about it. There are some problems you are analyzing where that intercept term will be important. But in my own case, in this specific problem, I don't need it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. You know, not all everything in economics has intuitive value. You know, that just doesn't make sense from the point of view of the real world. You know, it can make sense theoretically, but all right, any other question? Any other question?
Maybe I could ask a question here.
Okay, all right.
So I just have to ask. So I see that one of your variables is democratic level. How do you measure something like the democratic level? Is that a survey?
Oh yeah, yes. You know, the how democratic the economy is, the country is. That's a very good question. It gives me the opportunity to introduce something we do in data analysis in economics. Sometimes a variable may not be measurable. You know, it may not have quantitative value. So like democracy, are you democratic or are you non-democratic? I mean, sometimes you may not find a data set to do that. So we use what is called dummy variables. A dummy variable is a variable that takes the value of 1 or 0. So in my own case, I gave 1 to all the democratic countries, out of the 16 countries, I gave Jordan is, not Jordan, Lebanon is democratic, I gave 1 to it. Egypt is democratic, even though their democracy is not perfect, I gave 1 to that. Then Saudi Arabia, I gave 0 because it's a monarchical society. So That's what I use, dummy variable. And if you use dummy variable, the number you are given 1 means that if your coefficient for that variable is positive, it means that democratic countries will tend to attract more foreign direct investment than non-democratic countries. So the ones are the positive ones. And if I had gotten a negative on that coefficient, so it will mean that being democratic is associated with less FDI. So because the 1 is associated with democracy, it means that being democratic is associated with positive levels of FDI. So the more democratic, the more FDI you attract. So that's the way that's measured, dummy variable. It's just like men and women. If you want to find out whether having more women in an economy helps you attract more foreign direct investment. So if you have a gender in your models, the only way you can measure gender is 1 or 0, right? Yeah, so that's what we do in data analysis in economics. And we just use dummy variables when we cannot find quantitative variables.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions, guys? I know it's late Friday afternoon. You can't wait to start your weekend, right? So we have room for questions if you want to ask more questions.
Maybe one more question I could ask is,
Okay.
and I hate to keep monopolizing your time with my questions here, but could you speak to perhaps like some of the ethical considerations that you may have to undergo when you're working with data of this kind, or are there any ethical considerations?
Yeah, that's, you know, in economics, depending on the kind of data analysis you're doing, you have to go through IRB, the Institutional Review Board. So we have a rule in economics. If you're using data sets from a databases, you don't have to do that because it's not a human-based kind of data. You're not doing surveys. We do IRB, ethical things, when we are interviewing people. And so that's one of the things we do, that once you use databases, you don't have to do IRB. I had a student who did a senior project 2 years ago who was looking at marijuana use among college students. And he surveyed Allegheny students to find out whether there is a correlation between marijuana use and some demographic characteristics like gender, GPA, parental income, and so on. And then he collected survey data. But we had to go through IRB before he could do that, because he was collecting data from students. So it would be unethical to just go and start collecting data from people without making sure that he was doing that ethically. And the IRB will look at the questions you want to ask, make sure they are appropriate questions, maybe make sure you're not asking very sensitive, confidential, offensive questions. And so that's why you have to go through IRB. And so we do that depending on what kind of data you are analyzing. Yeah, but many students try to avoid that by just using databases and say, hey, I don't want to go through IRB, but it's very straightforward to go through IRB. Don't let that scare you. Yeah, the other good thing about economics research, the way we use data, this is very important. You cannot cook data. So if I run this regression, I get these results, I make my policy recommendations, guess what? Another person can go to check me out. They'll go and run my same regression to see whether they are going to get the same results as me. Sometimes some people will do that and say, hey, you cooked the results because I used the same data set that you used. I didn't get your results. So you manipulated your results to reflect your ideology. You know, we economists, we are human beings. We have our own preferences. Okay, so there are times when, going back to Professor Oliver's thing about ethics, unfortunately, some people would manipulate the results to suit whatever preferences or agenda they have, but that's unethical. In economics, we follow the results where the data leads us, okay? It may not be what you expect. You may not be happy about the results because it may debunk your long-standing beliefs, but just please follow the results. It would be unethical not to do that. Or sometimes some economists will think that, oh, Saudi Arabia wants a particular result, so I'm going to give them the result that will make them happy because they are paying me. I don't want to tell them what they don't want to hear because next time they're not going to hire me as a consultant. That's unethical. You've got to go look them in the face and say, hey, here's what the data shows. And as a professional ethical economist, I want to follow that data.
Great, thank you. Thanks again.
Yeah, yeah. You're welcome. Any questions from the students? Well, I can see they can't wait to start enjoying their weekends, you know. And, I don't blame them. It's been a long week. And just in case you remember you have any questions, you know how to get me. I'm at Econ. You can shoot me an email. You have access to my email. So if you're not remembering anything now, it's okay. But just reach out and I'll be pleased to continue with the conversation.
All right. Well, maybe we should, with your permission, we should wrap it up here before before we lose anyone here.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks. Thanks, Oliver. Have a good weekend, everyone. Have a good weekend, and please stay safe.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming to talk to us here. I know that you're very busy.
A pleasure. Always a pleasure to come to your class.
It's a pleasure to have you there.
Thank you,
sir. Thank
Bye-bye.
you very much. Take care. So for my class, I'd just like to say that there is no new lab. I was going to give a lab this time here. Typically I would have done, but I think that we've already had 6 labs, and so perhaps that's enough. And also, though, I'm sensitive to the fact that many students are actually leaving campus this next week. And so I think that maybe a lab from this course might be one of the last things that you'll be thinking about as you're making your move. So there is no lab this week, but I do invite everyone here to wear their mask and to be safe. And as always, if you have any questions over the other things that we've been working on in the the class material or anything else we've been doing, or this previous lab, if you're still working on it, please reach out. Let me know. Send me a Slack or send me an email, and I can answer any questions. If the message comes over, by the way, or the question comes over the weekend, I may be prevented from getting back immediately, but I'll try and get back to you within good time. Alrighty. Everybody, stay safe, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Thank you for being here.